Hello, beautiful. And before we begin, I would love to gently share that this episode does talk about marriage under extreme stress and trauma. It talks about disconnection and fear and repair. And there's nothing graphic, nothing shameful, but it is honest. So I would invite you to please listen in a way that feels most supportive and most gentle for you, and pause if you need to, and remember to breathe if it feels tight, if a memory comes up, if there feels like there's resonance there. And remember, the story is about repair. There is a happy ending at the end. So let's start by taking just one big deep breath together, the biggest one we've had all day. Oh, that always feels so much better. I forget to breathe sometimes. I don't know about you ladies. All right. So in our last episode, I shared what it was like stuck in a trauma loop last summer after losing my mom and losing access to myself, to even a desire to practice the skills. And once I had that desire returned, to be able to grab for them. And I also lost a sense of how to regulate myself after prolonged period of grief and responsibility and overwhelm. And today I would love to share how that loop impacted my marriage, not as a cautionary tale and not as blame or shame or criticism or that either one of us was doing anything wrong. Because now that I'm out of the loop, I can clearly see that that wasn't the case. Yet, as a very real story of what, in my own personal experience, love can look like when two people are really scared, and how repair becomes possible again with these skills if I just find a way to be gentle with myself and work the process. And there's something important that I'd also love to share about me, very private, very vulnerable. For me personally, I find that when my nervous system is under intense overwhelm, my body craves safety, like what I find most of us do. And for me, that safety often looks like an intense need or desire for physical touch, physical affection, closeness, physical intimacy, and a form of reassurance and almost a grounding and anchoring of like, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm loved, I can be present in my body and it's safe to be there. Because when I'm in those loops, it feels like that may not be true. And this has been a decades long challenge in my marriage, one that, in my belief, we have healed and it was no longer a problem. Yet, under this intense like, loop of overwhelm and grief and uncertainty last summer, it seemed to reopen, and it reopened with a vengeance. And under stress, my body reaches for what it needed or it felt like it needed at the moment. And it didn't do it in the way that I teach, not with fun and femininity and flirtation, or even just coming back to myself, taking really good care of myself, being soft, being loving, being grateful, all the things that I know create that magnetic pull. It came with, this time, control and urgency. And instead of expressing that need, that desire from grounded vulnerability, from all of that beauty that I just described with the skills, I slipped into my old malware, my old patterns, in a way that surprises me even today. And I once again became needy and demanding and ungrateful. And I started complaining a lot. I started justifying, started trying to make him wrong, show him that he was wrong, guilt him, shame him. I started judging him. And everything I was saying was really unkind and mean, definitely not attractive. And so looking back, disrespectful. And I was definitely not existing in my own vision for how I want to show up and I was completely off my paper for a few months, and I want to say this to normalize it because in my experience in one-on-one coaching, it happens more than we say out loud sometimes. And in my experience, we can sit in the shame of it. And it's human and it's real. So vulnerably, I admit that sometimes in this process, I didn't just blame, I begged, literally got on my knees and begged for help after I had shown up with so much disrespect. Sometimes I expressed what I now recognize as like sacred feminine rage throughout the process, slamming doors, demanding, becoming angry. I told him I hated him once last summer, which just couldn't be further from the truth. And I did all of these things from a place of pain, yes, my own internal pain, and I'm human. Yet I didn't do it with softness. I didn't do it with love. I didn't do it with kindness. I didn't even do it with asking for space to be held for me so that he could understand what I was going through. I did it with expectation, and I hated myself for it as it was happening. I blamed myself. I shamed myself because I know better. I'd fixed this. I'd healed it, or so I thought. And in my experience, trauma can bring up old malware, old patterns, really, really familiar things that I never desire to come up ever again, but there they are, waiting for me to deal with it. And I loathe being in that space because there were times throughout the first 25 years of our marriage that it was very familiar, so, so familiar. And what it creates inside of me, the cost to me for getting into that space is not just shame, it's even more disconnection, more loneliness, more negative self talk, definitely not focusing on his qualities that I love or even my own, just really beating myself up and blaming and judging him for it because I wasn't getting what I wanted or what I thought I needed. And I've worked very hard these last several years to break out of this pattern with tons of self care, working on my own feminine self worth, my own softness, my own vulnerability, with showing up with gratitude, for choosing my focus with self and spouse fulfilling prophecies, and also with understanding what respect looks like, not just for him, but respect for me too. And this is where, in that process, as I couldn't seem to get out of it for several weeks, shame started to deepen, my shame. And it alternated between blame because he wouldn't help me and shame because I was allowing myself to show up this way in a way that didn't feel good, was definitely not dignified. And I was telling myself a negative story that I had completely lost my way. I'd lost my mind. What's wrong with me? That I was failing, that I was broken, and that old familiar malware, the one that's almost always at the bottom in some way, shape, or form, that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough at these skills. I wasn't good enough at processing my feelings. I wasn't good enough at being pretty and attractive. Like there was something wrong with me. And, throughout this process, world was still happening around me. And I would find myself having decent days and being able to enjoy and experience my clients, many of whom were thriving, their marriages improving, celebrating wins. I even had some wins of my own at times when I could break out of the loop. Yet it would always, in the quiet, after things would settle down for the day, I would feel like I was failing at the very thing that I teach, at the very thing that I support, at the very thing showing up in my own vision for myself that had saved my marriage. And I find myself asking these beautiful women that were experiencing their courage and their bravery to practice these skills and trusting and showing up accountable in their way of being. A similar question that I ask myself as well. How do I want to show up in this situation? Because I know that I can't control situations as they occur. And that was what was going on. My whole life felt like it was out of control and I couldn't find any grounding. And so I asked that for myself. It's a powerful question when I really think about it because it puts me squarely back on my own paper. How do I want to show up in this situation? A situation that I can't control, but on my paper, when I can get back there, that's where all of my power lies. That's where I can control something, at least most of the time. And it offers me something to feel like I can be successful at when things around me feel like they're just spinning aimlessly and it's all just, it's not just out of control. I feel helpless to do anything about it. It doesn't feel temporary when I'm in that space. It feels like forever, which is really heavy and painful. Yet when I asked myself, how do I want to show up in this situation? Because I was in such a deep spiral during this season, my answer was I didn't care. I didn't care about dignity. I didn't care about grace. I didn't care about softness. I didn't care about femininity. Yeah, I would go into how I should show up because I knew that intellectually. But then the rage, the fear, the shame that was bigger than my desire of how I want to show up, they were more powerful than that question I was trying to ask myself to get myself back on track. Those heavy emotions were more powerful than my training, my experience, even my own wins and my past success in transforming my marriage out of this pattern for literally years with these same skills. I didn't care. I didn't want to access them. There was part of me that like couldn't seem to put what I knew I should do as my priority because I was just existing and the overwhelm felt more strong, more enticing, and sinking into that felt more, I don't know even how to describe it. It felt more safe to just give into it than to try to fight it, to try to find a different way out than any of my knowing, any of my evidence, any of my past experiences had to offer at that moment. So when I couldn't find the desire to reach for the skills, I just kept showing up in these same familiar patterns of controlling, demanding, begging, disrespecting around intimacy for these several weeks. And then it would be over, after I'd show up not proud of myself, I would go into negative spirals of negative stories and tell myself I'm failing. I give up. Why should I try? I thought I fixed this, and now here I am again. This is too hard, I would tell myself. And I would say, you should be able to handle this. You teach this. What is wrong with you? And I'd go look in the mirror and I would try to do self-fulfilling prophecies or mirror work or affirmations. I would try to do grounding work. And instead of doing that, I would spend that time beating myself up. Oh, that mean girl voice. She was so unkind and she was out of control. She was chastising me for begging, for lowering myself, for pleading, for yelling, for letting the rage bubble up, for slamming doors, for slamming cabinet, for bringing it up in the first place, because that felt shameful. So then I would vow to stop after I would go into my shame spiral. I'd vow to do self care. I'd vow to turn to gratitude. I'd come up with a plan that I knew would work if I would do it. I would vow to show up in the skills no matter what, even if that meant a constant all day long, how do I feel? What do I want? And taking care of me in every spare moment. I vowed to myself over and over again throughout these weeks to cease this cycle once and for all. I was going to get control of it. Do you hear anything familiar in there? I was trying to control my control. And I had the right idea. I wanted to get back into the skills. I knew that was my pathway. I believe in that strongly. I never really stopped believing. I was just tired and overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do. I was disappointed in myself. I wanted to lean on gratitude. I wanted to show up in respect. I wanted to figure this out for me, if nothing else. But anytime I would try, it felt like torture. It felt like a lie. It felt like that's not really who you are. Not right now. Look at how you just showed up. And after I would show up that way, the very connection that I was seeking, desperately seeking at the time, as an anchor to kind of shore me in the middle of like a major storm in life, the connection would end up with a bigger divide after I would show up in that way. And then I would just keep going into that same loop of begging, demanding, complaining, criticizing, showing up in a way I wasn't proud of, going into shame, promising myself I was going to stop. And then I would even muster up an apology, clean up my side of the street. And the very same day, after I would grit my way through that apology, because I still felt the urge to control, I still felt the overwhelming rage, even through gritting through the apology, through my clenched teeth, literally, and trying to mean it, trying to be sincere about it, and even getting forgiveness from my husband after I would apologize for it. He almost always is ready to forgive me when I'm ready to be accountable. Even after I would have that moment of realization and I'd grit through the apology and I would commit to myself that I was going to show up in the skills, I was still leaving the room after the fact, after I'd run away from giving my gritted teeth apology, hurting, confused, still, if I'm honest, beating myself up, wondering why I just couldn't figure this out and I couldn't make it stop once and for all, and sitting, sulking, marinating in the shame of finding myself back in this loop. And I would just get overwhelmed already again, the same very day, literally minutes or maybe an hour or two after I would recommit and do my apology. And what was getting in my way was that I was telling myself this story that I was broken. It was what I was saying. It was what I was believing about myself. I was believing that I was failing. I was believing at the very root, at the very core, that I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do this. I was believing that literally almost every moment in my mind without even realizing it. That shame made it harder for me to access the skills, even once I wanted to try again. Not just harder, impossible, really. And even after that apology, that shame created yet more distance between me and my husband, the person that I needed the most at the moment, because I just couldn't face it. And I'd love to share a little bit about his experience. And I want to be really careful here because this is my story, not his. But what I can say is this, because he has shared it with me since. He was scared too. He was overwhelmed too. Work was insanely stressful for him. He'd lost his mom only a few months earlier. He didn't know how to help me. He didn't know how to help me feel safe. And every time he tried, it wasn't good enough. He didn't know how to meet my nervous system that was completely dysregulated in the moment. and desperate for this reassurance to calm it down, and doing it in a way that felt totally disrespectful. So he would get angry when I would bring it up. He'd go into defensive mode. And why wouldn't he? Because I was blaming him. I was criticizing him. I was making it his fault, his job to fix it for me. And he'd ask me, what would you tell one of your clients if she was showing up like this sometimes when we would get into one of those loops? Ouch, right? Say that to a coach. There goes the shame even more because it was a question I was already asking myself. And he wasn't trying to hurt me. He felt disrespected because I was missing an important piece. I was missing pure vulnerability and softness and even self accountability. Yes, I was crying my eyes out, which was very vulnerable. I was literally begging for help, which you could say was vulnerable, yet I wasn't doing it from my own emotions. I was doing it from an expectation that he would fix this for me. And in the middle of trying to share my vulnerability, I'd throw in comments like, this is your fault. If I was important enough, you'd figure this out for me. I'd get snarky or rude, or unkind, and I'd say, I guess spending time with your wife is too big of a burden for you to bear. Who wants to spend time with that, right? Who wants to support that, calm that, when I've just sat there and not accepted anything that he was already offering me because he was already offering me comfort and love, a lot of grace. And I'd have days where I was just flat out indignant. I'd say, do you realize how lucky you are to have a wife who wants to be with you after 30 years of marriage? And I wasn't doing that to be hurtful. I was doing that almost from a self defense position because I believed that I wasn't enough. So I would direct the pain, I would direct the frustration, the anger out towards him. I would say, what, how lucky are you to have a wife that is, even for the last several years, shown up for the most part with respect and gratitude? Yeah, here you are just getting angry because I want to be close to you. And at some point, every time I would share, it would start out vulnerable. It would start out loving. And then I would get like enraged or go into blame or feel those old familiar patterns. And it'd go into the same malware that I lived for so many years. And there were even moments where I started to question his love for me. That's how deep these stories were running during this time, which is absolutely insane if you know either one of us, if you followed my story at all, because this man literally does everything for me. He takes care of our family. He works hard and he's an amazing provider. He fixes anything around the house that's broken. He's a wonderful father. I couldn't ask for a better father for our children. And I barely have to utter a desire for help or a trip away or a romantic date or some kind of little something contraption that I set my mind to. And I see him almost immediately trying to figure out how to make it happen. And he is so affectionate. He offers gifts and flowers and I love yous and never leaves without a kiss goodbye. Always stops in at my office to see if I'm on a call when he comes home because he wants that hello kiss too. He offers hugs. He believes in me. He's my biggest cheerleader. He offers foot rubs, you name it. He literally waits up for me if I go somewhere in the evening and meets me at the garage door to see if I need help, not knowing if I bought something or just making sure I'm safe. And, it's dark outside. There's no one, there's no danger lurking around just to keep me safe. This is the very same guy that a few months earlier got up at 1:30 in the morning to go to the hospital with me when my mom was passing, when he had to work the next day, big meetings, and he didn't leave my side for 12 hours, rubbing my back and my shoulders, giving me reassurance and quiet strength, and sitting on a stool that was much too small for his linebacker build. He was giving me everything, even during this really intense period of time, except this one thing that my brain focused in on. Not because I didn't see the other things, I didn't see them completely clearly, I'll share that, but because of what I was making that one thing mean. My brain was utterly convinced that it had to control this situation. That's what I was really looking for. It wasn't even about the intimacy, it was about control to feel safe because I felt so out of control and so helpless. And I did. I would lose track during those moments where I would show up like that of all the other things I just listed. And my focus was solely on his paper, on controlling physical intimacy, yet again, to feel safe. And it was a trauma response that I've worked hard to heal throughout my life. Yet this season was too big to be covered under the shelter of the work that I'd previously done. And it was asking for another layer. That's all it was. It was just asking for another layer to be worked through. And he would tell me, even when he was upset with me, I don't know how to help you. And then when he couldn't help me, he would get angry and I would lash back out. And then he would isolate and I'd feel even more alone. And then I'd have those moments of clarity that I talked about. I'd reset briefly, show up, trying to muscle my way through and control it and hide all the pain again just to keep the peace, just because I wanted to stop this. And he'd think that we were headed back on the right path, like I did, because I had this under control. I'd recommitted until I'd fall off that cliff again. And for a while, we were honestly both scared that we were slipping so deeply into this old pattern that we might not be able to get in front of it again. And when fear meets fear, in my experience, both people start to retreat. They go to their sense of safety, not because the love or the dedication or the commitment is gone, but because safety feels uncertain in the moment. And survival trumps love. Survival trumps how I want to show up. Survival becomes the priority. And our brains both thought we were in survival mode. And there were so many moments that I isolated, so many moments that I withdrew just to keep the peace. Moments when I thought, I don't know how to do this anymore. I just don't. It was just too painful. And there were moments that I wanted to give up, not on life in general, but on the idea that I could find my way back. Because I felt some kind of comfort in just giving in to the pain just for the moment. Yet when I would experience that, it terrified me. It literally terrified me because I knew what was at stake. I know what I almost lost. And I know what it feels like to not just get that back, but to experience all the beauty of the transformation that I've had with these skills. And eventually, through sheer perseverance and determination of not just giving into it completely, but letting myself have the moments where I did desire to try to reset and experimenting and working through that process. Eventually, something shifted, and it wasn't dramatic and it wasn't overnight. I realized that I couldn't heal this by controlling it. I couldn't heal this by proving my worth or my value or demanding that he does anything because that's not mine to control. I couldn't even demand reassurance. I also couldn't heal it by blaming or criticizing or even begging. Because if I'm honest, I was desperate, yes, when I was begging. Yet I also had a bit of a motive somewhere in there I can see now of if he could just see how much I'm hurting, then surely this won't be such a big deal. Surely he won't be so angry with me. Surely he'll help me with this. I also couldn't heal it by pretending like I was okay. What finally did help was giving myself what I now think of as this sacred pause because I had so much pressure on myself to figure this out, to get it under control, to put it back in a box. And it wasn't getting put back in the box, it just was refusing. And there was, with this sacred pause, which I describe as an extended time of duct tape to allow myself to re regulate, to get curious, to become the observer, to try to really be gentle and kind, not shaming myself, but try to just check in with my body and stop reacting long enough to be able to listen to what it was trying to tell me. And for a time, I held myself in that pause. And that pause, because I couldn't reach for any other self care, I set the intention that allowing myself that pause to get curious, to not need to fix this right now, to let it feel heavy for a little bit while I just sat in that and re regulated was my self care, at least for now, because I didn't have the desire or the energy to reach for any other kind of self care. And that felt reassuring to me to give myself that permission and to frame it not as failure, yet, but as like a thing that I could do for myself, I could do for my marriage. And I kept coming back to the same questions. What am I actually feeling right now in my body? What am I feeling? And asking myself, what do I truly want? What is it asking for? What do I need right now? And asking myself with vulnerability, how can I express that in a way that honors both my vision for myself to show up with dignity and integrity and accountability, and also honors my marriage, my connection, the respect that I want to create, that I want to continue to create. And that orientation, that shift, it started to give me the space, the mindset, the perspective to change everything. And I spent 3 days in that sacred pause that I now call my chrysalis because it was like I was a caterpillar and I'd been crawling through life and then 2025 hit. And I needed to just go in and recreate, reset, and doing nothing more than asking myself for 3 days, how do I feel? What do I want? And offering that up to myself with the intention of showing my nervous system that it was okay. I loved it no matter what I was experiencing. I was accepting of what I was feeling. It was exactly the healing that I needed to be able to reach for my skills again. And once I slowed down enough to re regulate my body to get out of that loop, I could speak differently to him and to me inside, internal, that internal dialogue. And then I did something that mattered deeply, really deeply. I apologized again. Yet this time it wasn't through gritted teeth or after I basically chewed a hole through the side of my jaw to get myself to be able to do it. I apologized from a place of sincerity. I apologized not for having the needs, not for what I was experiencing. I accept that I'm human. I need reassurance. I do need affection. And I do need care in a way that speaks most strongly to my system. But I apologize for how I'd expressed them, how I'd expected him to just do what I needed, what I wanted, what I was like demanding in the moment. I owned my fear. I owned my control. I owned my anger, and I owned and I atoned for the things that I said, the way that I showed up. I named my trauma. I didn't want to show up that way. And I also could see why it was happening, which felt really loving and respectful and self honoring to both of us. And I finally was able to stop making him responsible for fixing my nervous system. That's mine to figure out. And I pointed my very, very powerful manifester back on my paper fully for the first time in several weeks, because that's where my power lies. And I pulled my energy back inside of me instead of aiming every second of the day out towards him. And I found my strength again. I found my power in my paper. I found my power in taking care of myself in this gentle, soft, loving, self accepting way. And yes, in accountability and respect and vulnerability. And something happened, something softened for both of us. What I found when I finally came back, really came back, was love. Not perfect love, not effortless love. We're both human after all, but steady, available, consistent, committed love. And he hadn't ever really left me. He had been waiting, unsure, guarded, but still present, watching over me in his own way, even when I would lash out. I just couldn't see it because I was so focused on all the wrong things. And he couldn't help me, not because he didn't want to, but because he was so darn busy defending himself against whatever changing mood I was going to show up in and send his way and make his responsibility to fix. And as my nervous system finally settled, the connection, it eased. Trauma doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the relationship. And repair after rupture in a relationship also doesn't require perfection. It does require, in my experience, accountability without self attack, because that didn't get me anywhere. It requires vulnerability without shaming myself or blaming him. It requires finding what is going to offer me self regulation before I communicate. It requires compassion for both of our experiences. And it requires not losing sight of the beauty of everything around me that's happening that's right, because I was so tunnel vision focused on this one area and trying to control it with everything I had. And the forgiveness. I didn't show up in a way that I am proud of during these several weeks in this season. Not at all. Yet I am not shaming myself for that any longer. And that's loving myself. That's healing. That's acknowledging that I literally felt like I was struggling to survive in the moment. And even with my less than stellar way of being during this time frame, this amazing man was right there to forgive me, welcome me home when I finally found my own way back. And I couldn't find that way back until I was gentle with myself. And in no time, it wasn't just the physical intimacy that came back. The flowers returned, the date nights came back, the stolen kisses cornering me in our closet in our bedroom when I was trying to get ready and I was in a hurry to get on a call, then knocking on my office door to bring me something to eat or drink when he knows that I've had a long day of coaching and probably forgot to eat because that's my pattern. He worries about me. He cares about me. He wants to take care of me. He loves me in so many ways every single day. Yet it is up to me to look for those, to make those enough, to make those important, to receive what's being offered, and to focus on those so that I don't miss the beauty in each and every one of them, so that I can show up in a way that offers gratitude and respect and presence in return. And when I can do that, he shows up with even more of that beauty. This season didn't undo our marriage, although I was afraid several times that it was. It actually deepened it. And it deepened it because I was able to reach for the skills again. Yet again, they came to my rescue. It taught me even more accountability in this season and humility. It also reminded me that self care looks different in different seasons. It reminded me how to pause instead of have expectations of my own self and to try to push and control in moments where that felt too hard or too heavy. It taught me that love doesn't disappear when things get messy. Now that I have these skills, even if I lose them for a bit in a really hard season, that love is there. It waits, it endures, and in many ways it grows because that's just one more challenge we were able to overcome. Because getting through this hard, unexpected season only strengthened my conviction and my confidence in these skills as the way that I want to show up. So I'd love to invite you to consider this. If you're finding yourself in a season of trauma or control or ruminating thoughts that seems to be impacting your relationship, if you've lost your focus and you can't seem to find the beauty, the things to be grateful for, if you've expressed needs from fear and control instead of safety, and it feels like maybe you're hopeless, you're overwhelmed, or if you're afraid that maybe this time you've gone too far, I would just love to invite you to believe with me in this experience that repair is possible, connection can return, and you're not disqualified from love because you experienced a season where for a time it may have felt like you lost your way and you were struggling. You're still lovable. You're still worthy. And as we wrap up, I'd love to share this. Yes, the skills don't guarantee me perfection, that I'm going to show up perfect or my relationship's going to be perfect. I wish they did because that would make my mean girl voice very, very happy. I do find that love under significant struggles or trauma is not neat. It can be messy. It's not always pretty with rainbows and butterflies, but it can still be honest and beautiful. And in my experience with these skills, it can even be healing. So thank you for being here with me. We're walking a long road together with these skills, and that takes bravery and courage. And I am so grateful that you're here. And there's even more ahead. So if you haven't heard it today, you are worthy of love. You are amazing. You are beautiful. You are good enough just as you are. And even if you're walking through a season of uncertainty, in my experience, there is power in shifting that focus back towards my paper, my joy, what I can do in the moment to help my situation, even if that's just giving myself a sacred pause, even if that's just loving myself, even though I'm not really happy with how things are or how I showed up, even if that's simply just a nap or a self fulfilling prophecy or an affirmation or even lighting a candle. It all adds up. And learning to love myself is a lesson that I keep revisiting in so many ways, in so many layers, and all these different seasons that life brings. I believe in you. I've reminded myself numerous times the last several months that it's not over as long as I keep showing up for myself with love. And I invite you to find small ways to do that for yourself today and tomorrow and the next day. How can you show up with love for yourself? And until next time, I am sending you so, so much love and gratitude and hope and faith and standing for the vision that you're creating one step at a time.